One night, my world shattered. My parents threw me out, clutching just a suitcase, convinced I'd failed their dreams for me. Their words cut deep, branding me a disappointment. I stood in the rain, homeless, with nowhere to turn. But fate had a cruel twist. That same night, a lottery ticket changed everything. By dawn, I was a millionaire. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's about reclaiming my life, proving them wrong, and finding my truth. This is the 24 hours that turned my pain into power, forever altering who I am. I'm Sarah Thompson, 35, a jewelry designer who lost it all in one brutal night. My parents cast me out, convinced my dreams were a dead end. Left with just a suitcase, I faced a world that saw me as a failure. But that same night, a $37 million lottery win turned my despair into defiance. This isn't just a story about money. It's about clawing your way back when everyone says you're not enough. It's about proving them wrong, not with revenge, but with resilience. I rebuilt my life, forged a legacy, and found my truth. If you've ever been knocked down, forced to start over, or felt your dreams dismissed, this story is for you. I've been there, rain-soaked, broken but unbowed. Stick with me to hear how I turned pain into power, how I rose from nothing to everything. Your journey matters too. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let's connect. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what's the dream you're fighting for? What's the one thing you'd chase if no one could hold you back? Share it below because your story, like mine, deserves to be heard. Let's inspire each other to keep going. I grew up in Meadowbrook, a small town where dreams were supposed to fit neatly into boxes. College, career, stability. But I was different, a misfit in my own family. My father, Robert, was an accountant, obsessed with numbers, balance sheets, and predictable outcomes. Every night, he'd pore over spreadsheets, mapping out life like it was a ledger. My mother, Diane, ran a hospital with iron precision, her world built on schedules and rules. To them, success was a corner office, a steady paycheck, a life planned by 25. But at 12, I found my heart elsewhere. I'd sit for hours in my room, surrounded by old buttons from my grandmother's sewing box, smooth stones from the creek behind our house, and broken necklaces I scavenged from thrift stores. I'd string them together, crafting jewelry that felt like magic, each piece a tiny rebellion against the grayness of their expectations. My parents saw it as a childish pastime, something I'd outgrow. They'd smile indulgently, saying, "That's cute, Sarah, but you'll need a real job someday." I didn't want to hear it. Creating wasn't just a hobby. It was how I made sense of the world, how I poured beauty into a life that felt too rigid, too cold. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the only one who understood. She'd been an artist in her own quiet way, stitching quilts that told stories in every patch. She saw my spark and fanned it. I'd show her my clumsy creations, earrings made of mismatched beads, bracelets woven from yarn, and she'd beam like I'd handed her a masterpiece. "Sarah," she'd say, "the world needs more beauty. Don't ever apologize for making it." She'd wear my earrings to church, mismatched and bold, telling everyone who asked, "My granddaughter made these. She's going to be a star." Her belief was a lifeline, a whisper that I wasn't crazy for dreaming. At 12, I'd lose myself in her sewing room, sorting through her treasures. Glass beads, polished stones, bits of wire she'd saved from her own projects. She'd sit with me, telling stories of her youth, of how she'd wanted to paint but settled for a practical life. "Don't let them dim your light," she'd say, her voice soft but fierce. Those moments were my sanctuary, a place where I wasn't the odd one out. I'd sketch designs in a notebook, imagining a future where my creations weren't just a hobby but a legacy. Eleanor's faith made me believe it was possible, even when the rest of my world said it wasn't. As I grew older, the weight of my parents' expectations pressed harder. By my teens, their patience with my phase had worn thin. At 16, I sold my first necklace at a local craft fair for $20. I was over the moon, clutching that crumpled bill like it was a ticket to freedom. But when I showed my father, he barely looked up from his ledger. "That's nice, Sarah," he said, his voice flat. "But it's not a career. You need to focus on something real, like accounting or law." My mother was no different. She'd nod politely at my creations, then launch into a lecture about college applications and stable jobs. "Art doesn't pay the bills," she'd say, her tone sharp with worry. I tried to argue, to show them my sketches, my growing pile of beads, but their eyes would glaze over. To them, my passion was a distraction, a childish detour from the path they'd mapped out. I felt like a stranger in my own home, my dreams shrinking under their disapproval. By my 20s, I was torn between who I was and who they wanted me to be. To please them, I took a job at a financial firm after college, crunching numbers in a cubicle that felt like a cage. Every day, I'd watch the clock, counting down to my lunch break so I could sketch jewelry designs on napkins. Weekends were my escape. Craft fairs, flea markets, anywhere I could sell my pieces. My online shop started small, a few sales here and there, but it was growing. I'd stay up late, stringing beads by lamplight, dreaming of a life where I could create without hiding. But at home, the tension was suffocating. Dinner conversations were interrogations. "When are you applying for that management position?" my mother would ask, her voice laced with expectation. "You're wasting your potential," my father would add, his words like a hammer on my heart. I'd try to explain. My sales were climbing, a boutique in town wanted my work, but they'd cut me off. "Hobbies don't pay rent," they'd say. I felt like I was drowning, my dreams slipping through my fingers. When I was 21, Eleanor gave me an antique jewelry box, filled with tools and stones she'd collected. "Your grandfather gave this to me," she said, her eyes shining. "It's for someone who'll make something extraordinary." That box was my anchor, a reminder of who I could be. But my parents' voices were louder, their doubts heavier, and I started to wonder if they were right. I wasn't ready to give up, not completely. One night, at 17, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. "She's wasting her potential," my father said, his voice low but cutting. "She's not like us," my mother replied, as if I were a puzzle they couldn't solve. Their words burned like I was a shame they couldn't shake. I started hiding my craft fair earnings in a tin under my bed, each dollar a secret act of rebellion. I'd sneak into my high school's art room after hours, working under a flickering desk lamp, sketching designs that felt like pieces of my soul. Those late nights weren't just about jewelry. They were about proving I was enough, that my dreams weren't foolish. I'd lose myself in the rhythm of threading beads, the quiet clink of metal, imagining a world where I didn't have to justify my passion. Eleanor's belief kept me going. She'd slip me art books, whispering, "Don't let them steal your spark." I clung to her words, building a quiet defiance. By my early 20s, I was selling more online, saving every cent for a future I could barely see. But the pressure at home never eased. My parents saw my late nights as laziness, my sketches as clutter. "When are you going to grow up?" they'd ask. I wanted to scream that I was growing into myself, not their version of me. Those years were a tightrope walk, balancing their expectations against my truth. I wasn't just fighting for jewelry. I was fighting for the right to be me. By 35, I was still living with my parents in Meadowbrook, a choice born of necessity, not comfort. I'd moved back after college, trying to save enough to break free while building my online jewelry shop, Eleanor's Legacy. It was a fragile dream, pieced together in stolen moments. I worked a soul-sucking job at a financial firm, surrounded by beige cubicles and fluorescent lights that drained my spirit. Every morning I'd drag myself to that office, my heart heavy, knowing I was living a lie. My real life happened in the margins. Lunch breaks spent sketching intricate necklaces on scraps of paper, Weekends at craft fairs where I'd sell a bracelet or two, my earnings climbing slowly but steadily. $500 one month, $800 the next. It wasn't much, but it was proof my passion wasn't a fantasy. I'd found a tiny studio apartment downtown, a 400-square-foot haven I could almost afford. Just a few more months, I told myself, and I'd be free to create without apology. I thought my parents might finally see my progress, maybe even feel a flicker of pride. But I was naive. Home was a battlefield, every dinner a clash of wills. My father, Robert, would sit at the head of the table, his accountant's mind tallying my failures. "When are you applying for that management job at the firm?" he'd ask, his voice sharp, like I was a line item that didn't add up. My mother, Diane, was no softer. She'd spent her life running a hospital, her days a symphony of order, and she saw my jewelry as chaos. "You're too old to play artist, Sarah," she'd say, her words slicing through my resolve. I'd try to explain. My shop was growing, a boutique in town had reached out, I had a business plan, but they'd cut me off. "Hobbies don't pay bills," they'd snap, their voices heavy with disappointment. I'd sit there, fork in hand, feeling like a child caught misbehaving. I wanted to scream that this wasn't a hobby. It was my life, my calling. But their doubts were relentless, burrowing into me. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was chasing a dream that would never hold me. Yet every sale, every customer's kind email, was a spark of hope, a reminder that I was building something real, even if they couldn't see it. The tension grew thicker with each passing week. I'd come home from work, exhausted, and find my parents waiting with another lecture. They'd point to my brother David, who'd followed their path into real estate, as the model of success. "Why can't you be more like him?" they'd ask. I loved David, but his approval of their vision felt like another wall closing in. I'd retreat to my room, pulling out my grandmother's antique jewelry box, running my fingers over the tools she'd left me. Those moments kept me grounded, but the pressure was suffocating. I was 35, still living under their roof, still fighting for the right to be me. I thought I could endure it, that I could change their minds. But I was wrong, and the breaking point was coming. The air in our house had turned toxic, every conversation a minefield. 2 weeks before everything shattered, I overheard my parents in their bedroom, their voices low but piercing. "She's become a burden," my father said, his words like a blade through my chest. "She's 35 and still chasing childish dreams," my mother added, her tone cold, as if I were a problem to be solved. I stood frozen outside their door, my heart pounding, realizing they'd given up on me long before I'd known it. That moment stripped away any hope I had of their support. I clutched my sketchbook tighter, my designs a quiet act of defiance, but the hurt lingered, a wound that wouldn't close. I told myself I'd prove them wrong, that my jewelry shop would be my escape. I just needed time. But time ran out faster than I expected. The night it all fell apart started like any other. I came home from the firm, my head buzzing with new designs, and announced I was quitting my job to pursue jewelry full-time. I'd prepared for this moment. Spreadsheets of sales, emails from customers, even a contract from a boutique interested in my ocean memory collection. I laid it all out, my voice steady, expecting a fight but hoping for understanding. Instead, I got rage. My father's face turned red, his voice booming. "This isn't a business, Sarah, it's a garage sale," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. My mother was worse, her eyes cold as she revealed they'd gone through my desk, read my diary, my sales reports, my private dreams. "Real artists get discovered young," she said, her words dripping with disdain. "You're just embarrassing yourself." I stood there, shaking, my carefully built plans crumbling. I tried to defend myself, to show them the numbers, the potential, but they wouldn't listen. Then came the ultimatum, delivered like a verdict. "Keep your job or get out." I looked to my brother David, hoping for an ally, but he just stared at his plate. "Maybe Dad's right," he mumbled, his betrayal sharper than their anger. I felt the room shrink, the walls closing in, my family turning into strangers. They didn't give me a chance to negotiate. My father pointed to the door, his voice final. "Pack your things and go." I stumbled to my room, tears burning my eyes, and packed a single suitcase. I had to choose, clothes or my jewelry tools. I chose the tools, stuffing them in with a few shirts, my grandmother's box too precious to leave. My mother stood in the doorway, silent, as I zipped the bag. My father handed me my purse and said, "You're making a mistake." I wanted to scream that they were the ones breaking us, but I couldn't find the words. They pushed me out into the rain, the door slamming behind me, the lock clicking shut. I stood in the driveway, my life reduced to a suitcase, realizing even the car I drove wasn't mine. They owned the title. I had $342, a maxed-out credit card, and no home. The rain came down in sheets, soaking through my jacket as I stood in the driveway, the echo of that slammed door ringing in my ears. I was 35, and I'd never felt so alone. My suitcase felt heavier with every step, its wheels catching on the wet gravel. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and called my best friend, Emily. Her phone went to voicemail. She was at an airport out of reach. I tried 3 more friends, each call a desperate plea for help, but the answers were the same. Out of town, no spare room, sorry. Their excuses felt like rejections, piling onto the wound my family had carved. I wasn't just homeless. I felt unwanted, a failure in a world that had no place for me. The rain blurred my vision, or maybe it was the tears, but I kept walking, the suitcase rattling over cracked sidewalks, cars splashing water as they passed. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay still. 40 minutes later, my legs aching, I saw the neon glow of the Pinewood Motel, its vacancy sign flickering like a faint promise. I'd driven past it countless times, a run-down place on the edge of town, but now it was my only option. I pushed open the door, my clothes dripping, mascara streaking my face. The owner, Rebecca, looked up from the counter, her eyes softening at my state. "Rough day, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice a small kindness in a cruel night. I nodded, unable to speak, and handed over $75, nearly all I had, for a room. As I walked to it, the suitcase's wheels echoed in the empty lot, each clatter a reminder of how far I'd fallen. I was alone, with no plan, no safety net, just a bag of dreams and a heart full of hurt. But in that storm something shifted. That walk, that cold, wet night, was the start of my fight to reclaim myself. The Pinewood Motel was my last refuge, a crumbling shelter at the edge of Meadowbrook where the neon vacancy sign flickered like a dying star. I stumbled through the door, soaked to the bone, my suitcase trailing water across the linoleum. My clothes clung to me, heavy with rain and despair, and my face was a mess of mascara and tears. Rebecca, the woman behind the counter, looked up from her ledger, her eyes softening with a kindness I hadn't felt in hours. "Rough day, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice warm, like a hand reaching out in the dark. I nodded, barely able to speak, and slid $75 across the counter, nearly all the cash I had left. She handed me a key, her gaze lingering, as if she saw the weight I carried. I was 35, and I'd never felt so small, so utterly lost. The room was a time capsule of faded dreams, peeling wallpaper, a sagging bedspread, tiles cracked like my resolve. I dropped my suitcase, its thud echoing in the silence, and stood there, shivering, trying to process how I'd ended up here. Just hours ago, I'd had a home, a family, a fragile but growing jewelry business. Now, I was a stranger in a motel, with $267 to my name and a maxed-out credit card. I peeled off my wet clothes, each piece falling like a layer of my old life, and stepped into the tiny bathroom. The shower's hot water hit me like a shock, and I sank to the floor, curling into myself as the sobs came. They weren't quiet tears, They were raw, wrenching, the kind that tear you open. I cried for the family I'd lost, for the dreams they'd mocked, for the girl who'd once believed she could make them proud. The water drowned out my voice, but not my pain. Through the thin walls, I heard Rebecca and her husband, Donald. Their voices strained as they argued about unpaid bills and a looming foreclosure. Their desperation mirrored mine, a reminder that I wasn't the only one fighting to survive. It was strange, but their struggle gave me a twisted sense of connection, a thread of humanity in my darkest hour. I'd hit rock bottom, a place where hope felt like a cruel myth. My phone sat on the sink, silent. No missed calls, no texts from my parents or my brother David, no sign they regretted what they'd done. I thought of my grandmother Eleanor, the only one who'd ever believed in me, and wished I could hear her voice, her quiet assurance that I was enough. But she was gone, and I was alone, with no plan, no safety net. Just a suitcase stuffed with jewelry, tools, and a heart full of hurt. I dried off, wrapped myself in a threadbare towel, and sat on the bed, staring at the wall. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew I couldn't stay broken. That night, in that desolate room, I was at the edge of myself, with nowhere to go but through. Before crawling into bed, I reached for my phone out of habit, a ritual that had kept me tethered to my grandmother Eleanor since her passing. Every Friday, we'd buy a lottery ticket together, using her special numbers from a little leather-bound book she'd left me. It wasn't about winning, it was about honoring her, about holding on to the moments we'd spent laughing over coffee, circling numbers like they held the secrets of the universe. That night, exhausted and hollow, I opened the lottery app, expecting nothing more than a fleeting connection to her memory. But the app was down for maintenance, a small cruelty that felt like the universe laughing at me. I sighed, set my phone on the nightstand, and fell into a restless sleep, the weight of the day pressing down like a stone. I didn't dream of wealth or revenge, only of the rain, endless and unyielding, washing away what little I had left. The next morning at 7:30, my phone buzzed, jolting me awake. My eyes were gritty, my body aching from the lumpy mattress, but I grabbed the phone, half expecting a spam message. Instead, a notification from the lottery app glowed on the screen. "Congratulations! You've won!" I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. It had to be a scam, a glitch, another twist of fate to mock me. I almost deleted it, my thumb hovering over the screen, but something stopped me. Maybe Eleanor's voice in my head, urging me to check. I opened my suitcase, hands trembling, and pulled out the ticket, its edges crumpled from the rain. The numbers were printed in smudged ink. 08, 17, 23, 42, 54, 9. I compared them to the app's winning numbers, my breath catching as each one matched. My heart pounded, a wild rhythm that drowned out the motel's hum. No way. Couldn't be real. I checked again, then a third time, my vision blurring with disbelief. I nearly threw the ticket away, convinced it was a cruel joke. I'd stuffed it into my pocket the day before, a forgotten reflex, and now it was my lifeline. I sat on the bed, clutching it, my mind racing. I called the lottery commission, my voice barely a whisper. The operator, a woman named Linda, sounded skeptical, her tone clipped. "Read the barcode again, ma'am," she said, like I was wasting her time. I fumbled through the numbers, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. She paused, then asked me to repeat it a third time. "Hold on," she said, and I heard her typing, the clicks loud in my ear. Then her voice softened, almost awed. "Miss Thompson, you're holding a ticket worth $37 million. The words hit me like a tidal wave, knocking the air from my lungs. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The room spun, the cracked tiles and faded curtains blurring into a surreal haze. I managed a choked, "Are you sure?" And Linda laughed, a kind sound. "I'm sure." "Congratulations." I hung up, staring at the ticket, its numbers glowing like a beacon. $37 million. It didn't feel real. Not after the rain, the rejection, the despair. I'd gone from nothing to everything in a single night, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Eleanor's numbers, her faith in me, had carried me here. This wasn't just luck. It was a miracle, a chance to rewrite my story, to rise from the ashes of my family's betrayal. I sat on that motel bed, the lottery ticket trembling in my hands, afraid to blink, like it might vanish if I looked away. My mind was a storm, disbelief, fear, and a fragile spark of hope colliding. This didn't happen to people like me, not to women who'd been cast out, who'd sobbed on a motel floor just hours ago. I kept waiting for the catch, for someone to say it was a mistake. I ran my fingers over the ticket, its edges soft from the rain, and thought of Eleanor. Her numbers, her belief had done this. It felt like she was still here, guiding me through the darkness. I told Rebecca, the motel owner, unable to keep it inside. I knocked on her office door, my voice unsteady, and blurted, "I won the lottery." She stared, then pulled me into a hug, her arms strong and warm like a mother's. "Your grandmother's watching over you," she said, her eyes shining with tears. I broke down again, not from pain, but from the weight of possibility. For the first time in years, I could breathe, could see a future where I wasn't fighting to be seen. The money was a lifeline, but it was Eleanor's faith that anchored me. In that moment, I knew this wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption, about building a life that honored her and me. The $37 million lottery win didn't feel real. Not at first. I was still the woman who'd cried herself to sleep in a motel room, still raw from my family's rejection. The ticket sat on the nightstand, its number staring back at me, a surreal promise I was terrified to trust. I kept expecting a call saying it was a mistake, that I'd misread the numbers, that the universe wasn't done breaking me. But it was real, and I had to act fast to protect it. I wasn't naive. I'd heard stories of lottery winners losing everything to greed or bad decisions. I wasn't going to be one of them. My first call wasn't to a lawyer or a bank, but to Rebecca, the Pinewood Motel's owner, who'd shown me kindness when I had nothing. Her cousin, James, was a financial advisor, and she swore he was trustworthy. I dialed his number, my voice shaking, and told him I needed help. "How much are we talking?" he asked, casual at first. When I whispered, $37 million, there was a long pause, then a low whistle. "All right, Sarah," he said. "Let's keep this quiet." James became my lifeline. We met in his modest office, a world away from the glitzy wealth I'd imagined. He walked me through the steps with a calm I desperately needed. First, we set up a blind trust to shield my identity. The headlines were already sniffing around. A local reporter had called the motel, asking about a big winner staying there. My stomach churned at the thought of my name splashed across papers. My family's betrayal turned into gossip. James moved quickly, filing the claim discreetly, ensuring my anonymity. I stayed at the motel another week, lying low, jumping at every car that pulled into the lot. I'd peek through the curtains, half expecting paparazzi or worse, my parents somehow sensing my secret. The paranoia was exhausting, but James was methodical. He explained my options. Take the annuity or the lump sum. I chose the lump. $37 million after taxes, a number so vast it felt like a dream. Invest most of it, he said. Keep some liquid, but don't go wild. I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities, but I knew I didn't want mansions or sports cars. I wanted freedom to create, to breathe, to be me without apology. My first act wasn't for myself. Rebecca and Donald, the motel owners, were drowning in debt, their voices haunted by foreclosure fears I'd overheard through the motel walls. I asked James to pay off their mortgage anonymously, a quiet thank you for their kindness. Cost $180,000, a drop in my new reality, but it felt like everything. When I finally told Rebecca about the win, her eyes filled with tears. "You're an angel, Sarah," she said, hugging me tightly. I cried too, not just for her relief, but for the power to make a difference. I opened a bank account, watching the numbers appear on the screen. Millions, safe and real. I paid a year's lease on a modest downtown apartment, a space to start over. No extravagance, just stability. I bought a used car, a simple hatchback, and drove it to the motel to say goodbye. Rebecca slipped a keychain into my hand. A tiny pine tree, a nod to the pine wood. "Your family now," she said. That keychain became my talisman, a reminder of where I'd been and what I'd survived. The money wasn't my identity. It was my tool, a way to rebuild on my terms, to prove my family wrong, not with vengeance, but with a life they couldn't imagine. With the money secured, I turned to my dream, the one my family had mocked, the one I'd fought for in stolen moments. My jewelry business, now called Eleanor's Legacy, was my heart, named for my grandmother who'd seen my worth when no one else did. I wasn't starting from scratch. I'd been selling online for years, scraping by with craft fairs and late-night designs. But now I had the resources to make it real. I moved into my downtown apartment, a quiet space with big windows that let in light I hadn't felt in years. I set up a studio in the corner, investing in top-tier tools, polishing wheels, precision pliers, gemstones that sparkled like Eleanor's eyes. I'd spent years sketching collections in notebooks, ideas I couldn't afford to bring to life. Now I could. I poured my soul into every piece, crafting necklaces and rings that told stories of resilience, of beauty born from struggle. My ocean memory collection, inspired by Eleanor's love for the sea, became my flagship. Blue topaz and aquamarine woven with silver, each piece a tribute to her faith in me. Eleanor's Legacy wasn't just a business. It was a mission. I remembered the sting of my parents' doubts, the way they'd called my work a hobby. I didn't want other artists to feel that pain. So, I founded the Eleanor Wilson Foundation, named for my grandmother's maiden name, to support young creators whose families didn't believe in them. I set aside $2 million to fund grants, studio spaces, and mentorship programs. The first recipient was Maya, a 19-year-old potter whose parents had pushed her toward nursing. Her application essay broke my heart. She'd written about hiding her clay under her bed, sculpting in secret. I awarded her a $10,000 grant to rent a studio and buy a kiln. Months later, she sent me a vase, its edges uneven but alive with passion. I placed it on my desk, a reminder that every dream matters. Helping Maya felt like honoring Eleanor, like healing the part of me that had been dismissed. The business grew faster than I dared hope. I hired a small team, a web designer, a marketing expert, a jeweler to help with production. My online shop exploded, orders pouring in from across the country. A boutique in Chicago picked up Ocean Memory, then a gallery in New York. I'd wake up to emails from customers sharing what my pieces meant to them. A necklace worn at a wedding, a ring gifted to a daughter. Each message was a victory, proof that my work wasn't a garage sale, as my father had sneered. I stayed grounded, avoiding the trappings of wealth. My apartment was simple, my clothes practical. I'd drive my hatchback to the studio, the pine tree keychain dangling from the mirror. But I wasn't hiding anymore. I walked taller, my voice steadier, my purpose clear. Eleanor's Legacy was my answer to every doubt, every rejection. It wasn't about revenge. It was about building something undeniable, something that would outlast the pain. I started mentoring through the foundation, meeting artists like Maya who reminded me of myself, dreamers fighting to be seen. One evening I taught a workshop, watching a young painter named Leo mix colors with a focus I recognized. "My dad says this is a waste," he admitted. I knelt beside him saying, "Your art is your truth. Don't let anyone steal it." The words were for him, but they were also for the girl I'd been, the one who'd needed to hear them. Eleanor's Legacy became my way of rewriting my story, of turning my family's betrayal into a force for good. The money changed my life, but it didn't erase the scars my family left. Rumors of my wins started to spread, whispers in Meadowbrook that I wasn't the failure they'd cast out. My brother David was the first to reach out. He spotted me at a coffee shop, his eyes lingering on my new watch, a subtle silver piece I'd designed myself. "What's going on, Sarah?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and unease. I sipped my coffee, keeping my answers vague. "Just working," I said, not ready to share the truth. I wasn't hiding the money. I was protecting my peace. David had stood by while my parents threw me out, his silence as wounding as their words. I wasn't sure I could trust him, not yet. He pressed, mentioning our parents were worried. But I saw through it. They hadn't called when I was homeless, when I'd needed them. Their worry felt convenient, sparked by whispers of wealth. A week later, my mother, Diane, left a voicemail. "Sarah, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I didn't call back right away. I needed to be ready to face them on my terms. I'd spent years shrinking under their expectations, apologizing for my dreams. Not anymore. I agreed to meet them at a neutral spot, a quiet diner outside town. Walking in, I felt the weight of our history, the arguments, the slammed door. They sat in a booth, looking older, smaller somehow. My father, Robert, fidgeted with his coffee mug, his accountant's precision faltering. My mother's eyes darted to my clothes, my bag, searching for clues. I sat across from them, my posture straight, my voice calm but firm. "You threw me out because I wouldn't live your version of my life," I said. "I've built my own now, and you don't get to claim it." Their faces fell, but I wasn't done. "If you want to be in my life, you need to acknowledge what you did. Respect my choices. And my money. It's mine." The silence was heavy, their discomfort palpable. My father cleared his throat, starting with excuses. Stress, worry for my future. But I cut him off. "This isn't about you," I said. "It's about what I survived." My mother's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. I laid out my boundaries. No lectures, no control, no pretending the past didn't happen. I wasn't cruel, but I was unyielding. They'd hurt me deeply, and trust would take time. I left the diner feeling lighter, not because they'd apologized. They hadn't, not fully, but because I'd reclaimed my power. I wasn't the daughter they could dismiss anymore. Weeks later, I invited them to my apartment for dinner, a test of their willingness to change. The evening was tense, their eyes scanning the high ceilings, the view of the city. I served simple food, pasta, salad, keeping the focus on the conversation. My mother brought my childhood photo albums, a tentative gesture, her way of reaching out. My father asked about my jewelry, stumbling over the words, but he listened when I described ocean memory. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. David came too, with his new girlfriend Lisa, a painter I'd helped through my foundation. Seeing her there, thriving, felt like a quiet triumph. My family wasn't healed, but they were learning to see me, not as their failure, but as Sarah Thompson, the woman who'd turned betrayal into a legacy. This wasn't revenge. It was redemption, a life built on my terms, unshaken by their doubts. 3 months after my lottery win, I stood at a crossroads with my family. The $37 million had rebuilt my life, but it hadn't erased the pain of their betrayal. My parents, Robert and Diane, and my brother David had cast me out, dismissing my dreams as worthless. Yet now, with whispers of my wealth circling Meadowbrook, they wanted back in. Our first meeting at the diner had been tense, my boundaries laid out like a fortress. Acknowledge your mistakes, respect my choices, and don't touch my money. They'd listened, but words alone couldn't mend what was broken. I wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but I wasn't ready to lose them forever either. So, I invited them to my apartment for dinner, a test of their willingness to change. I wasn't seeking their approval anymore. I was offering a chance to meet me as I was, not as they'd wanted me to be. The evening was a delicate dance. I cooked pasta and salad, keeping it simple, grounding the night in something real. My parents arrived, their eyes scanning the high ceilings, the city view through my windows, as if measuring my success. They looked older, their faces etched with lines I hadn't noticed before. David brought his new girlfriend, Lisa, a painter I'd helped through my Eleanor Wilson Foundation. Her presence felt like a bridge, a reminder of the good I was doing. We sat around my small dining table, the silence heavy at first, forks clinking against plates. I broke the ice, asking them to share a memory from my childhood. My mother hesitated, then offered a story about me at 5, stringing beads from her sewing kit, her voice soft with nostalgia. It was a crack in the wall between us, a glimpse of the woman who'd once seen my spark. My father was quieter, his accountant's precision faltering. He cleared his throat, asking about my jewelry business. Not its profits, but the designs themselves. "What's that ocean memory piece about?" he said, his tone awkward but genuine. I explained the blue stones, the way they captured my grandmother Eleanor's love for the sea. He nodded, listening, a small but seismic shift. My mother brought out my childhood photo albums, a peace offering she'd mentioned at the diner. She slid them across the table, her fingers lingering on the cover. "I thought you might want these," she said, her eyes meeting mine. I opened one, seeing a photo of me at 12, grinning with Eleanor, beads scattered around us. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I thanked her, my voice steady, knowing this was her way of trying. David surprised me most. He apologized, haltingly, for siding with our parents that night. "I didn't get it, Sarah," he said, Lisa's hand in his. "I see it now." Lisa chimed in, thanking me for the foundation's grant that let her paint full-time. Her gratitude, her success, felt like a victory, not over my family, but for the girl I'd been, the one they doubted. The dinner wasn't perfect. We were still learning each other, still navigating the scars. But as they left, my mother hugged me, a brief but real embrace, and my father muttered, "We're proud." It wasn't everything, but it was enough for now. This wasn't revenge. It was healing, slow and imperfect on my terms. The grand opening of Eleanor's legacy was the culmination of everything I'd fought for. My jewelry gallery, a sleek space in downtown Meadowbrook, was filled with my creations. Necklaces, rings, and earrings that told stories of resilience and beauty. The Ocean Memory Collection gleamed under soft lights, each piece a tribute to my grandmother Eleanor, whose belief had carried me through the darkest nights. The room buzzed with critics, clients, and friends, their voices mingling with the clink of wine glasses. I stood at the center, no longer the outcast, no longer the daughter who'd failed. I was Sarah Thompson, 35. A jewelry designer who'd turned pain into purpose. This wasn't just a business. It was my legacy, proof that my dreams were never foolish. I'd prepared a speech, but it wasn't enough. Instead, I pulled out a letter I'd written to Eleanor, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. "Dear Eleanor," I began, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. "Your belief carried me here. You saw me when no one else did. And every piece in this gallery is for you. Thank you for teaching me that beauty is worth fighting for." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling over us. I felt her presence, as if she were standing beside me, smiling. My eyes found my parents in the crowd, their faces unreadable but soft. They'd come, a step I hadn't expected, and it meant more than I could say. My mother approached me after, holding a small pottery bowl she'd made in a class she'd started taking. Its edges were uneven, the glaze imperfect, but it was hers, a piece of her own creativity. "I thought you might like this," she said, her voice shy. I took it, my fingers tracing its curves, and felt a warmth I hadn't in years. "It's beautiful," I said, meaning it, seeing her in a new light. She was trying not just to mend us, but to find herself the way I had. My father lingered nearby, awkward but present. He looked at a display case, then at me. "Your work is beautiful, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "I never really looked before." Those words, simple as they were, cracked something open in me. They weren't an apology, but they were a start, a recognition of who I'd become. I met Michael at a charity auction a week later, a man whose easy laugh and kind eyes caught me off guard. When I told him about the win, he grinned, saying, "That explains the fancy restaurants." He didn't care about the money, only about me, and that acceptance was a gift I hadn't known I needed. As I stood in the gallery, surrounded by my creations, I realized this was my closure. The money had given me freedom, but Eleanor's faith had given me purpose. My family was healing slowly, but the real victory was mine. I'd built a life they couldn't dismiss, a legacy that would outlast their doubts. This wasn't revenge, it was redemption, a testament to the woman I'd always been, shining brighter than ever. The $37 million lottery win didn't make me who I am. It gave me the freedom to become her. When my parents threw me out, suitcase in hand, they thought I'd fail, that my dreams of jewelry design were a childish fantasy. That rainy night, I was broken, cast into a storm with nothing but my grandmother Eleanor's belief to hold on to. But by dawn, a miracle shifted my path. The money was a tool, but the real wealth was the courage I found. To rebuild, to create Eleanor's legacy, to help artists like Maya find their voice. I turned their rejection into redemption, not through revenge, but through a life they couldn't dismiss. My family's betrayal was a wound, but facing them, setting boundaries, and seeing their tentative steps toward understanding taught me healing isn't linear. My mother's pottery bowl, my father's quiet acknowledgement, my brother's apology, they're threads in a tapestry still being woven. Eleanor's numbers weren't just luck. They were a reminder to never stop believing in myself, even when the world says you're not enough. This journey wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving me right. I built a legacy that outshines their doubts, a testament to the girl who strung beads in secret, dreaming of beauty. Sometimes losing everything is what sets you free. You don't need millions to find your purpose, just the strength to rise, to create, to claim your truth. My story is for anyone who's been knocked down, told their dreams don't matter. Keep going. Your legacy, like mine, is waiting to be built, one defiant step at a time. What would you do with the freedom to be yourself, to chase the dream you've buried under doubt? That's the question I leave you with. My journey, from a rainy night with a suitcase to a $37 million miracle, showed me that true wealth is living your truth, no matter who tries to stop you. Now it's your turn. Drop your story in the comments. What's the dream you're fighting for, the one worth everything? Where are you watching from? And what's the first step you'll take to claim it? I'm reading every word because your voice matters. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. A friend, a dreamer, anyone who's ever felt unseen. Let's build a community of resilience, of people who rise above rejection to create something extraordinary. Your dream isn't foolish. It's your legacy. Thank you for walking this path with me. Let's keep inspiring each other, one story at a time. Share it, believe it, live it.